Greetings, Internet. So, I was at the thrift store the other day and found this, which it actually led me to a subject I did want to talk about. So, I wanted to cover what I have often referred to as DC, the next generation. 90s DC Comics. And there are a number of critics out there with a lot to say, especially about the fella featured here. For those of you not too familiar with the Batman canon, or at least unfamiliar with the 90s Batman canon, we'll give you a little rundown. Almost everybody knows Bane showed up, right? Figured out who Batman was, orchestrated a complex plot. Well, not really that complex, but pretty involved. And it ended with Bane snapping Batman's spine, right? And he had to retire from being Batman for a while he recovered. So during that time, a new Batman arose, Jean-Paul Valley, who is a prick. I've yet to meet someone who genuinely likes him, or at least liked him as Batman. It was a pretty controversial move at the time, because they sort of made it out that like he was definitely going to be the new Batman. A lot of people felt like if there was going to be a new Batman after that, it needed to be Dick Grayson. But they did a total like rebranding of Batman for the Nightfall event, to where like even in the letters pages they changed the figure of Batman to the armored up douchebag Jean-Paul Valley Batman. So a lot of people have a problem with him. A little bit of background. The reason I call it the next generation is that this comes around from starting in the late 80s, but really that's just, we're talking about Wally West becoming the Flash. Then we get into the 90s, 93, 94. We've got Aquaman comes back, but he's an entirely different Aquaman than we've ever really gotten to know. That was when he grew out his beard, he got his hook, and the first, if you read that 90s Aquaman series, the first like 20 issues is just Aquaman finding different DC characters to beat the shit out of. Like within a 5-issue span, he tackled Green Lantern, he tackled Superboy, he tackled Lobo. So all this going on. Superman is dead. There are 4 new Superman going around. Pretty much everybody knew that Superman was going to be back, but he wasn't for the moment. So him and Mullet were chilling in the Fortress of Solitude. Superboy had shown up, clone Superboy, different Superboy than we had before. So he was running around with his leather jacket, doing things. Green Arrow was dead. He had been killed by Hal Jordan, and we had Connor Hawke taken over as the Green Arrow in the 90s. And Hal Jordan, of course, died in the Parallax incident. So we had Kyle Rayner, who seems like by far the most unpopular Green Lantern to date. Everybody hates Kyle for some reason. We might get into that later, because I have a lot to say about Green Lantern too. I was a big Green Lantern fan. So Jean-Paul Valley, he's an entirely different kind of Batman. Jean-Paul Valley feels like Bruce was a little too light on the criminals. If you're familiar with Jason Todd's Red Hood, very similar kind of feeling there, right? Jean-Paul Valley, his whole deal is his Batman suit is armored up, shows off a bunch of muscles, but also a bunch of metal claws. He can fly, he's got rocket boots, and he kills people. That's the biggest departure. That's what everyone seems to have a problem with him, is, he runs around killing people as Batman, in the name of Batman. This is probably going to be a little brief, because here's the thing with people hating it that they don't seem to really get. You're supposed to hate him. you're not supposed to accept him as a true heir to the Batman mantle. That's an important part of the story. If you actually read the Knightfall story, maybe it's because people were kids. Maybe it's because they didn't want to finish it. I know there are a few people who said they hated it so much they never got past like the first 4 or 5 issues in the Knightfall saga. But once you read it, it becomes very clear, and actually becomes clear here in this issue with Dick Grayson here in the back as he's fighting him. The whole idea is that he is a bad Batman. But why would they do that? There are 2 reasons, I think, and they're related. Going on in the industry at this time, comics are coming, winding down the collector's boom, right? Something that if you weren't around for it, you may have heard of it, you may not have. So what happened late 80s, early 90s, a bunch of guys, especially the founders of Image, right? They were selling a shit ton of books, and they weren't seeing anything from it because they were staff writers and staff artists. So they were getting the regular old pay rate, and comics were setting records for the books they were doing, and they weren't seeing anything from that. As Todd McFarlane once said, like, they take his art, he sells 10 million books, then they take his art, put that on a t-shirt, they make money off that t-shirt, and he doesn't even get a t-shirt, right? The t-shirt with his art on it, they can't even comp that for him, and they strike off onto their own. And one of the things about Image that really set it apart was that the success Marvel was having, and to some extent that DC was having, people were getting muscled up in the books, right? They're drawing with exaggerated anatomy, rippling muscles everywhere. Superheroes had always been strong, but now they were like bodybuilder cut, right? Every single one of them. Huge, jacked guys. Guys that, like, there's no way you could believe this dude would be running against an enemy without superpowers. So Image had sort of taken the guys that were the most successful at that sort of style. They formed their own company, started writing their own stories and books. And Marvel and DC, if you watch their comics from the time after those guys left, they continued that style and started to ape it. And DC didn't do that as much until Image really came around. But then if you look at the art from the time, it's clear that that's what they're trying to do. They're exaggerating the anatomy of everybody, making the muscles and characters bigger with every issue, right? And there was a certain story aesthetic that started happening around that same time. That's something that went across the whole industry outside of the more indie publishers, right? Like, you had a Shooter started up Dogs of War. You look at that, regular guy, right? You got John Byrne's Next Men, who, aside from he put a very sort of unique art style into it, but everyone was sort of built like regular people outside of what concessions you make for the art style he was using. But then you've got like Nightwing over at DC has an 8-pack all of a sudden. That wasn't really his thing. And he's got all these ripples underneath his ribs showing off his musculature. I mean, he's a lean, relatively scrawny to guys like Superman, acrobat, and they're drawing him like a power lifter, right? So that's going on everywhere. And here comes John Paul Valley. He is sort of the anti-Batman, right? But when you look at his character, he's the hardcore, graphic, extreme 90s, drinking a surge. He is almost like the embodiment of that new direction that 90s comics were taking. And what his story is really saying is, no, he's not a good Batman, because Batman is good enough, right? Batman is what he is. Batman was what he was. And this new 90s thing is not what Batman embodies, right? He's not a fit for that universe. As much as you may think that he is dark and gritty and brooding and everything, yeah, he had those qualities. But Batman had a code, right? Batman was a certain type of hero, and even with the increased darkness that he got in the 80s, he was still at his core the same values conscious human hero, right? So that's the real deal with Azrael. That's John Paul Valley's other name, Azrael. He came from a long line of Night Avengers. Each had the mantle of Azrael. He incorporated that into his Batman thing. So that's what the story's really saying, and I think a lot of people are missing that when they are too harsh on the characters. Like, yeah, he is a really bad Batman, but he's a really bad Batman for a reason. He is a bad Batman to show that not every hero has to fit into that new 90s extreme aesthetic and direction. That there are some that are good enough with the way they've been. And when Batman came back, it proved that, because he came back, he beat the shit out of Azrael, stripped him of his armor, beat the fuck out of him in a bat cave, let him know how pathetic he was. Azrael's come back recently. I don't know if we'll talk about that. That's a little off topic now, but next time I'll continue this theme. I'll do probably next time I'll do Aquaman, and then I'll do Green Lantern, talking about Kyle Rayner and everything that went wrong with him, and maybe why he's a little bit misunderstood as a hero. But really, I'd just like to cover him. For guys like me, I got into Green Lantern after he took over. He was the Green Lantern for me outside of Super Friends, because Super Friends was the only Green Lantern experience I had prior to the aftermath of Parallax Emerald. That's going to be our next topic. So you guys have a great day. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, if you like hearing me talk, go ahead and subscribe. Hit that bell notification icon so you get informed of the next video that comes up, all my future videos. And go ahead and check us out on Facebook. I'll be posting up some more writing this week. I've been doing a lot of writing. Things have been a little dark around here lately, so that's my escape usually. And I've been making sure to get it all typed out so I can actually post it. I have a big notebook problem, so a lot of times I write stuff and then I have to spend time later typing it out. But I've been going directly into the laptop this time. I want you guys to have a great week, great day. Thank you for watching. Bye.